Michael stood frozen in the middle of the elegantly decorated hall. Balloons swayed gently above the crowd, and soft music floated from the string quartet in the corner, but nothing around him mattered. His stomach twisted as his father, Richard, raised his glass with a broad, satisfied smile. "To the real child we love," Richard declared, and all eyes turned toward Michael's younger brother, David, grinning smugly at the center of attention. A wave of humiliation washed over Michael. The murmurs of relatives and the subtle smirks of distant cousins felt like daggers in his chest. His mother, Elizabeth, looked torn, but said nothing, while David basked in the applause. Michael's jaw tightened, and without a word, he let his drink slip through his fingers, glass shattering softly against the marble floor. He turned sharply and walked toward the back exit, ignoring the whispers and curious glances that followed. The cool night air hit his face as he stepped outside, heart pounding, anger and hurt entwined, but beneath it all, a faint, unspoken resolve began to form. Michael's phone buzzed in his pocket, snapping him out of the haze. A discreet notification from his business dashboard lit up the screen. His latest startup had just secured a multi-million-dollar contract with a major tech firm. He allowed himself a small, private smile, letting the cool night air mingle with the rush of satisfaction. While his family celebrated his brother's engagement inside, Michael had quietly built an empire from scratch. Software platforms, investment portfolios, and partnerships that could rival companies twice his father's age. None of them knew. Not his father, not David, not even the distant relatives who thought of him as the quiet, disappointing older son. He leaned against the railing, looking out at the city skyline shimmering below. The lights reflected more than just glass and steel. They reflected the life he had painstakingly constructed, far from the dismissive eyes of his family. The humiliation inside the hall was temporary. What mattered now was the reality he had silently achieved, a reality that no toast, no favoritism, could ever diminish. Weeks later, Michael stood in his penthouse office, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. The room hummed with quiet energy, phones buzzing, assistants moving efficiently, contracts stacked neatly on his mahogany desk. Every detail spoke of precision and control, from the polished steel shelves to the subtle scent of fresh coffee lingering in the air. He walked past a sleek conference table, glancing at a team of young executives discussing a merger he had orchestrated. Despite the success and wealth surrounding him, Michael's satisfaction came not from recognition, but from the discipline and patience that had built this life. No one had seen him at the ground level. The late nights coding in a cramped apartment, the endless negotiations over video calls, the constant doubt he had to silence. Here, in the quiet of his domain, he was untouchable. The city lights below mirrored the empire he had quietly forged, far from the judgmental eyes of the family who had once dismissed him. For the first time, he felt an unshakable sense of self-worth, proof that he was more than a label, more than a comparison, more than a toast at a party. It started subtly. At a weekend brunch with mutual friends, whispers floated across the table. "Have you seen Michael's new headquarters?" one cousin murmured, trying to sound casual. "I heard he closed a deal bigger than anything David's family business has ever done," added another. Michael, sitting quietly with his coffee, caught snippets of conversations aimed at him but gave nothing away, only a polite nod, a faint smile. At the grocery store, a former neighbor paused, feigning casual recognition while sneaking a glance at his luxury car. Even distant relatives who had once ignored him now lingered near his social media posts, liking photos of awards, launches, and charitable donations. The curiosity was growing, a ripple slowly building momentum, but Michael's silence was deliberate. He knew that revealing too much too soon would only fuel their need to belittle or compete. "Let them notice," let them wonder. The power of patience was his strongest weapon, and for now, observation alone sufficed. One rainy evening, Michael's phone rang. The caller ID showed Claire, a cousin who had always tried to stay close to family drama. "Hey, I heard some things," she said cautiously, her voice coated with a mixture of concern and envy. "People are saying you've done really well. Are they true?" Michael leaned back in his leather chair, listening to the patter of rain against the window. "They are," he replied evenly, giving nothing more. Claire hesitated, then asked, "So, you're really doing all this on your own? Without them?" Michael's silence filled the space between them more than any words could. "Finally," he said, "I built my life the way I wanted. That's all that matters." Claire's tone wavered, a subtle recognition of the power shift. She hung up, leaving Michael staring at the rain streaks racing down the glass, fully aware that now the news was out. Quietly, but inevitably, others would come to test him, and he would be ready. A week later, Michael returned to the family home under the pretense of attending a casual dinner. As soon as he stepped through the front door, Richard's eyes narrowed, Elizabeth looked uneasy, and David's smug grin faltered for a moment. "Michael, I didn't expect you tonight," Richard said, voice tight with a mix of surprise and irritation. David stepped forward, trying to mask insecurity with arrogance. "So, you've been doing all that business stuff, huh? Big deals, big offices, impressive." Michael smiled faintly, but his eyes remained calm, steady. "Yes," he said simply. "And I've learned a lot about what it means to build something meaningful, on your own terms." The room tensed. Richard tried to assert authority, offering advice and subtle demands masked as concern, but Michael held his ground. He walked past them, paused at the staircase, and said, "I came here to see family, not to compete for approval." Then, without another word, he turned and went upstairs, leaving a silence heavier than any argument. His presence alone had shifted the balance. The unspoken realization settled in the room. He was no longer the son they underestimated. After that dinner, Michael's phone and inbox were inundated. Messages from family members veiled as concern begged him to reconsider his choices, while others hinted at disappointment or guilt. Emails arrived from distant relatives pointing out old family obligations and traditions, subtly reminding him that he owed loyalty. Social media posts appeared from cousins tagging him in memories meant to provoke nostalgia and regret. Every attempt to pressure or manipulate him met only with calm observation. Michael read each message, noting the patterns and motives behind them, but responded sparingly, if at all. The emotional blackmail and subtle threats that once might have unsettled him now slid off like rain on polished glass. He understood their tactics, their desperation, and their inability to confront the reality he had created. In the quiet of his penthouse office, he allowed a faint smirk. Patience and strategy were on his side, and the storm outside mirrored the tension brewing within his family, entirely powerless against him. The confrontation came to a head at a charity gala Michael had hosted. As he mingled among dignitaries and business partners, he felt a sudden shift in the room. Richard and David appeared at the entrance, flanked by several relatives, their expressions a mix of determination and disbelief. "Michael," Richard called out, his voice strained but authoritative, "we need to talk. Now." Guests glanced over, sensing tension. David tried to assert dominance, stepping closer, but Michael remained composed, adjusting his cufflinks calmly. "There's nothing to discuss," Michael said, voice low but firm. "I've built my life. I don't need validation from anyone here." The crowd hushed, absorbing the silent authority radiating from him. David's face flushed, Richard's jaw tightened, and the relatives standing beside them faltered under the weight of Michael's presence. Without raising his voice, Michael signaled subtly to his assistants, ensuring the gala continued smoothly, a public display of poise and control. The family's forced intrusion only highlighted the difference in power. He was untouchable, and they were exposed in front of everyone. 2 days later, Michael quietly executed a move that would cement his authority without a single confrontation. He finalized a public partnership that directly outperformed the family business, ensuring media coverage reached the local and national news. Articles highlighted his innovations, leadership, and charitable contributions, subtly contrasting the family's traditional methods without ever naming them. Simultaneously, he transferred a portion of key investments away from family-controlled ventures, effectively cutting off financial leverage they once assumed he depended on. The messages came quickly: text, email, phone calls, pleading for meetings, explanations, or reconciliation. Michael responded with a single statement, posted on his company's public newsletter. Success isn't about seeking approval, it's about building value where it matters most. The impact was immediate. Richard and David watched from a distance, stunned, realizing the quiet son they had dismissed had orchestrated a flawless display of independence and power. Michael didn't need to shout or argue. The results spoke louder than any words could. Michael stood on the balcony of his penthouse at sunset, the city stretching endlessly beneath him. The soft golden light reflected off the skyscrapers, mirroring the calm clarity he now felt within. He thought of the engagement party, of his father's toast, of the humiliation he had once carried like a weight. Now it felt distant, almost irrelevant. He had built a life on his own terms, achieved recognition, and found peace far beyond the confines of family approval. A gentle breeze brushed against his face as he sipped his coffee, savoring the quiet triumph that no applause could define. In that moment, he realized the truth he had always known but never allowed himself to embrace fully. The measure of a person isn't in the favor they receive, but in the life they create and the strength they carry silently. At my brother's party, they toasted the real child, unaware I had already become the real person I was meant to be.